But I didn't take notes because Sam was going to do it. But it was just, I hope someday you get to hear Sam and some of his stories. But he did write me up a short paper even before we got together that tells some of their history. They had one of the first women pastors in the area. She came in 1887. Yeah. And he talked to me about how the Church of God has always welcomed women pastors. Her name was Elizabeth Walter, and she came with her husband, Joshua. And she pastored here until she died in 1930. So she was here for a long time. They began meeting in a building that they moved here from Vesterberg, and they had to move it in 4 sections and then reconstruct it when they got it here. And she and her husband worked at the church all those years and built it up. She, in 1947, they began meeting with the Alma Church. That would be after she died. There had been ups and downs, just like with any other congregation, so they all started meeting in Alma. And then, after a short time, they decided to split apart again, and St. Louis started meeting on their own. This year will be their 125th anniversary celebration for the Church of God. And that church was one of the founding members of the Office of Human Services. And then others joined in, but they were one of the original members founding that. Sam Dunbar is currently working on a book telling about the Church of God campgrounds history. And he said when he finishes that maybe he'll write one about the history here too, because he's hometown St. Louis. But as Judy said, Sam's health is not very good right now, so we'll see how he comes on that. But he has been working on a book about the history of the Church of God campground. In 1858, the Church of Christ was founded here. And again, it was a story I found that interested me. There was a man here in St. Louis who wanted to be baptized. And he was told that he would have to travel 200 miles to Indiana by horse to be baptized. They didn't have anybody here that could do it. So instead, he traveled to Muir. Somebody told him about a church in Muir. And he traveled there, and one of the elders from Muir came back with him, and this man and 11 others were baptized that were part of the Church of Christ. And when they got their first pastor, he would preach 4 times a day, walking an average of 43 miles to pastor those 4 churches. He walked from St. Louis to Ohio to attend their annual conference meeting. Think about that. From here to Ohio to attend a meeting. But he did it. And the people at the meeting felt so bad that they had somebody come back with him. They didn't want him to come back alone. So someone came back with him. And at that time, the church was known as the Disciples Church. But he traveled all that way just to attend the meeting. In 1889, they purchased the Congregational Church property, which was at Saginaw and Franklin. And there was a fire there, and it was repaired. And in 1906, they built their first parsonage. And in 1920, they started talking about their new building. And at that point, they were meeting in a schoolhouse when they began their building. In 1942, they made their final payments, and then the Depression hit. And it wasn't until 1958 that they had another big campaign and added on their educational wing. And then in 67, they knew they needed more space, and they added on their other big area in 1976, their Family Life Center. So it's been a process with them too. The other thing I found that interested me was the quotes about some of the pastors. as I read their stories. Here's a couple of them. The pastor served acceptably. One lacked in energy, but made up for the deficiency with his social qualities. That was said. Another, he possessed a genial personality, and he was a pleasing speaker. Some of the books talked about the women some, and how the women have been an integral part of church history. I think it was in the big book, talked about the women in the church carrying on the tradition of Lydia, Mary, and Martha in our sacred stories today. But other than the Church of God, I couldn't find much information on women pastors in the area too much until more recently. The original denominations, the Presbyterians and the Lutherans, are no longer here in St. Louis. The churches today facing the same challenges, all of the denominations, declining and aging population, difficult economic times once again, and some spiritual, I guess I'd call it upheaval in America. You know, what kind of services should we have? And I think all of the churches that I talked to, everybody said kind of those same kind of things. Do we have a traditional service? Do we have a contemporary service? What are we going to offer? The other thing that all of the pastors said that I spoke with is denominational loyalty isn't anymore. You know, it used to be, if you were raised Catholic or United Methodist, Presbyterian, that's what you stayed. And that's not the case anymore. So that's another issue that all of the churches are struggling with. And the problem with that is, often you'll go to a different denomination. Like, say, somebody might go to a Presbyterian church because they like the pastor or they like the kind of service, but oftentimes they carry on their Roman Catholic beliefs with them or whatever other tradition. And then you kind of have all this blending together and trying to work things out and make things work in your congregation. There's just been a blending like never before. And I think all of you here that are from churches probably realize that in your congregation you might have many different faiths represented or denominations all in the Christian faith. I contacted some of the other churches and didn't get information back. These are the ones I primarily got things from. And I was hoping tonight that you might have stories or history that you could share too. I know I had Dorothy called me today and said, do you care if I bring some stuff? I've got some stuff from Zion Lutheran. So I know she's got stuff, and I brought this information up here that you can look at. And do any of you have interesting stories about things you remember from being raised in